Well, hello, everyone.
Hey, good evening, guys. So I'm just going to ask you to turn off your video until our item comes up, and then we'll introduce you. Thanks.
Through to Director Coates. Is the video up and ready to run?
I believe it is. I'm just going to give Councillor Wilson a call because we don't have his connection yet.
Sure. I'm going to proceed to calling this regular meeting of council to order. First, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory. This now is First Nation. First item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. So I'll just make the motion that the February 9th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Do I have a second?
Point of order.
And what's your point of order, Councillor Gusselbrack?
I think we should extend the courtesy to Councillor Wilson to give him a couple minutes to get signed in here.
Sure, I don't disagree with that. It's just when we have a quorum of council, I have the duty to call the meeting to order, and then we can just recess the meeting once the agenda is adopted, and then we can just wait for Councillor Wilson at that point if that's the will of council.
I believe we've called. Have you called the meeting to order?
Yes, I have called the meeting to order. So I have moved the adoption of the agenda. I'm just waiting for a seconder. Do I have a seconder to adoption of the agenda? So seconded by Councillor Savage. Any discussion on the agenda, additions or deletions? So Councillor Gusselbrack.
Once again, I think we should give Councillor Wilson a couple of minutes to sign in here. We've extended that courtesy to other council members, and so I'm asking that we do that.
Well, Councillor Gusselbrack, I do recall a recent email from you indicating that if we start a meeting at 6 p.m., regardless if a person's late or not, we start the meeting on time. So I'm just adhering to your request. I don't have an issue once we have adopted the agenda to recess until we can make contact with the missing councillor. That's fine by me.
That's fine. I'm glad you read my emails. So I have an amendment to the agenda, and I would like to move that item 9D, which is a matter dealing with the RDN, that be moved after item 8 in the agenda tonight.
And so that's a suggested amendment. So second by Councillor Proctor. Any discussion on the moving of that item? Okay, hearing none, I will move to call in the question on amendment. So all those in favor and opposed? And noting that Councillor Savage is opposed, the amendment carries. So now we're back to the agenda as amended. Is there any additional deletions or additions or restructuring of the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I will move to call in a question on adoption of the agenda. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So at this point through council, as staff is attempting to make contact with Councillor Wilson, I'll just recess the meeting and hopefully we can get underway shortly. Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Just wait for Councilor Proctor, Councilor Gusselbrecht to appear. Great. Just through to Councilor Wilson, just for your benefit, we adopted the agenda, and item 9D is going to be following item 8 of our agenda. So moving on in our agenda, we have under number 7, we have the consent agenda. I'll just make the motion that the recommendation listed for item 7A in the consent agenda be approved. Do I have a seconder to that? Second by Councilor Gusselbrecht. I will move to call in question. All those in favor and opposed, that is carried unanimously. Okay, so that takes us on to public input period through to, I guess we'll go through to Director Coates. Do we have anybody registered this evening?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, so now we're into 9D of our agenda. So we have the Regional District Nanaimo Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service Amendment Bylaw number 1556.05/2021. So I'll just make the motion that the council of the District of Lantzville consent on behalf of the electors to the Regional District of Nanaimo Board's adoption of Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service Amendment Bylaw number 1556.05/2021, and further that the Regional District Nanaimo will be notified accordingly. Is there a seconder to that? Second by Councilor Savage. Discussion on this. It's pretty straightforward, but through to council. Or as to secondary, I believe that was Councilor Gusselbrecht had the second, or no, Councilor Savage had the second or not. Any comment, discussion from council? Okay, hearing none, I will move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, that is carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us on to item 9A. So we have the 2022 grants and aid applications, or it should be application. And I'll just make the motion that grant and aid be approved in an amount of $500 to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 257 to assist with the celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee during the summer of 2022, dependent on COVID restrictions. Is there a seconder? So second by Councilor Gusselbrecht. Discussion on the grant and aid application. Okay, hearing none, I will move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, that is carried unanimously. That takes us on to 9. Sorry, I just gotta clip my paper. So that takes us on to 9B. So a bylaw number 283. We have a presentation this evening by Urbanics. So we have 2 consultants, I believe, presenting on this evening. So through to Director Limshu, did you want to introduce the consultants to council? And then following the presentation, there's a staff recommendation. There's several staff recommendations that follow. So through to Director Limshu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to council. So as outlined in the staff report, it discusses 3 main items. The first item is in regards to the financial impact analysis prepared by Urbanics Consulting. And this is at the request of council. So as council will recall, first and second reading were granted to bylaws 283 and 284 prior to Christmas. There was direction from council to have this report prepared prior to proceeding to public hearing. And so that is why Urbanics is before us tonight to present the report, outlining the assumptions and the findings of the report. The second part of the staff report talks about the unit count for the proposed development that we are referring to Village South. The third item in the report provides an overview of the public events held by the applicants to date. So with that, I'll introduce the consultants from Urbanics that will be speaking tonight. So we have Mr. Kyle Yoshida, and we have Saivash Tahan. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. So with that, I'll pass it over to the consultants.
Great, thanks, Frank. Hello, everyone, and thank you to the District Council and staff for inviting us to attend this council meeting. I'll first start by giving a bit of a brief overview of the work we conducted, as well as our general conclusions before opening up for questions. So Just to start with a bit of background, in October of last year, we were contacted by the previous District Director of Planning and Community Services to provide a financial analysis of the Village South SAP. Our original report, with the development program provided to us at that time, concluded that the development would be a net economic benefit to the District of Lantzville. However, upon reviewing Councillor Savage's feedback, there were 3 broad areas that we thought brought up good points and that we tried to address in our addendum. These were number 1, additional police costs, number 2, lower tax revenue assumptions that incorporate administrative and maintenance costs and therefore better reflect net revenues to the district, and then number 3, confirming the specific development program and construction phasing details in order to clarify any confusion. So the first 2 points were included in the updated analysis in our addendum, and hopefully clarify that the project will very likely be a net economic benefit for the district. The last point regarding development program specifics is valid and likely should be refined further. As a bit of background, typically in our experience, the development process will begin with the developer commissioning or conducting a market feasibility study to assess the market warranted development program for a site. It's likely still worthwhile to pursue this in order to further refine and collectively settle on one specific development program. That being said, our update analysis concluded that from an economic point of view, the project remains a net benefit to the district over a 20-year period. Given the expenses the developers are shouldering, it's likely that profit margins for them will be very tight, and it may not make sense for them to move forward on a mixed-use, higher density development. In fact, from a profitability as well as community acceptance point of view, it may make more sense to simply develop large, lower density residential units on the site. To conclude, in a certain sense, Lantzville faces a fairly binary choice in terms of what it wants for the site, as well as broader community. Both of these choices are valid, long-term visions for the district and depend on community priorities. On one hand, lower density and predominantly large single-family residential units, similar to what currently exists in the district, or on the other hand, higher residential densities that support a mixed-use village core and are able to attract and retain commercial tenants. Just to illustrate and hit home that last point, as part of our due diligence process, we spoke to senior management of a major potential grocery company who expressed interest in opening a store in Lantzville, and they reconfirmed our impression that substantial population growth would be required before it would make economic sense for them to pursue opening a store in the district. Hopefully this clarifies any questions the district council and staff may have. We are happy to answer any additional questions you might still have, and thank you once again for your time.
Great, thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up to council for questions of the consultants. So through to council, so Councillor Proctor, go ahead.
I'm uncertain through you, Mayor, to Mr. Yoshida. I'm uncertain what you meant by higher density to be able to support the grocery store. Are you saying that the 730 units that are proposed would support a grocery store?
So generally speaking, and my colleague Siavash might be able to speak a bit further to this, but generally speaking, and from our sort of due diligence process, speaking with potential tenants, grocery tenants, in terms of densities, you would probably need to see well above 5,000 residents in the community prior to any sort of economically viable village core, mixed use, commercial tenant, just given the close proximity to Woodgrove Center in the north of Nanaimo. So in order to support the sort of storefronts, retail, commercial uses potentially envisioned, you would need the accompanying residential and population base, essentially.
Thank you.
Additional questions from council? So for myself, just along that same thread, just with respect to substantial growth, you're kind of quantified that we need at least 5,000. Now, is that in the immediate area, like lower Lantzville, or is that Lantzville total population? I don't know if you can provide any clarity around that.
Right. I'm not sure.
I can answer that actually.
Sure.
I've done many grocery store studies in urban areas and rural areas and remote areas and also in suburban areas. Generally, what we mean by that 5,000, it's actually 5,000 is on the very, very low end of it. It's usually about 5 to 10,000, and in very urban areas, it's sometimes even greater than that, 15,000 people.
Sorry, I'm just a point of privilege. I'm just not hearing you very well, Mr. Tahan.
Maybe I'll speak a little louder, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. What we're saying is that 5,000 to 10,000, that range, it represents the number of people within the trade area. Now, the trade area generally is some sort of geographic area that can be derived from things like, depending on the context, a walking distance isochrone, if it's a very urban downtown area, or in the case of Lantzville or in suburban communities or rural communities, a driving distance.
Sorry, as a point of privilege, I apologize. I'm having a little trouble hearing as well. I'm wondering if just speak a little more slowly or closer to the mic or.
Yeah, I concur. I'm having the same difficulty. Sorry, I'm not trying to give everybody an inspection of my ear tonight, but it's.
I'll try to log in with a headset. Maybe that'll be better.
Must be nice to have attentive listeners.
Hello? Can everyone hear me better now? Yes, yeah, okay. Again, so the population figures that we're highlighting here, which is again 5,000 at the extreme low end, close to 7,000 to 10,000 for a reasonable level, reflects a population in a trade area. Now, the trade area is an area that is geographically proximate to the commercial facility being proposed. In a rural area or in a suburban area, this is usually reflected by a 5 or 10 minute driving isochrone. What that means is a 10-minute drive in normal speed. In urban areas, for example, you would flip that around to walking isochrones. Again, a 10-minute walk or 15-minute walk. That is what we mean by 5,000 people. Now, again, as Kyle was alluding to, when we were very close to heavy competitive pressure, like the Woodgrove Shopping Complex, which, as you all know, is the largest shopping complex on Vancouver Island, even 5,000 becomes kind of lower on the scale because you have such a heavy competitive pressure from Woodgrove that you actually need a much higher level of people living in the trade area because you have that competitive pressure. So if you need a Walmart, it's unlikely that a Walmart will replicate itself in Lantzville. Not that we're looking for Walmart type facilities here, but a grocery store of 15, 20,000 square feet, which is usually what a grocery store needs to be a full service or full offering grocery store. It needs that residential population base, or else there's just not enough top line sales for it to make sense. You would have smaller offerings. You would have things like corner stores. You wouldn't have a full scale, full service grocery store. So that's what we mean with the numbers 5 to 7,000, 5 to 10,000 even.
And I just had a follow-up along it's not necessarily the grocery store piece of it, but it's the mixed use commercial end of it. And is it the same or similar expectation for population to support the mixed use side of things?
Yeah, so depending on the kind of offering. So as you can tell, if you run a coffee shop or a sandwich shop, you don't need as many people in your addressable customer market. Maybe you'll be, I don't know the numbers offhand for those kind of businesses. You don't need 1,000 people or even 2,000 people. You might be okay with only 500 people. You can have a little sandwich shop operate with that much more limited population base. But if you have more higher order retail operations, for example, specialty ski equipment, bicycles, anything like that kind of stuff, paint shops, gift shops, and things of that sort, things that are rarer, you need much higher population bases for those kinds of facilities. So smaller facilities might be more okay with smaller populations, but when you need a cluster of them, and again, when you're next to a heavy competitive pressure from Woodgrove, it becomes harder for the small business owner to justify opening up in that village center when the population base is not high enough within geographic proximity.
Okay, thank you. So I noted that Councillor Proctor, you had your hand up first for a question, then Councillor Gusselbrecht.
Thank you. I have one further question at this point. I'm wondering what all, through you, Mayor, is involved in the civil works figures on page 62 of our agenda. In phase one, $10.7 million worth of civil works. Phase two, $5.5 million worth of civil works. Is that simply the roads and the sewers that will support that community, or is it, what all is involved in those figures is my question.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So those figures would be in addition to the DCCs the private developer would be paying, which theoretically should capture at least a portion of some of the infrastructure required for the development and the servicing. And you can almost think of it as, a lot of that being additional infrastructure that the developer is shouldering, is bearing, is going to pay out of their pocket essentially, that otherwise potentially may have to have been borne by the district, in addition to the DCCs, which theoretically should capture already the infrastructure requirements.
So could you give me an example? Would that be roundabouts on Ware Road? Would that be part of the civil works figures, or rain gardens, or? Yeah,
the specific, so I was provided a sort of itemized list that does actually break out in sort of pretty good detail the specific, infrastructure items. But just from recollection, it would include, for example, as you mentioned and alluded to, roads, water systems, things of that nature that would naturally be required to support and service any residential development there.
So the civil works only includes items that are specific to that neighborhood?
Yes, that's correct.
But we would be maybe perhaps expecting less civil works if there was less density.
That perhaps, again, that comes back to a question of sort of firming up with the developer, the sort of development, the specific development program. That could be the case. And, I think relatively by our estimation, maybe C of Ash can speak to this a bit more. But from our experience, it looks like the developer is being rather generous in terms of what is being offered to the district, to the point where margins and profitability for them will probably be rather tight. And it might even be a question of if they should proceed with this development as it stands economically right now for them.
Regarding civil works for lower density, I think you touched on a good point. If there is less people, less households in the area, of course you would need less, for example, diameter for sewer pipes or stormwater pipes. That does scale. However, this gets into very big technicalities, which we're actually not the experts of. We usually contract with civil engineering firms, but there is like a step function in how these things work. So if you have a lesser dense area, sure, you don't need as much road capacity, but you can't, like, they don't linearly decline or incline. So it's at the end of the day, the final densities, the last time I reviewed the report copied together, is only around 500, 600 households. That is on, if I'm not mistaken, almost 50 acres of land. That is a very low level of ultimate population density, to the level that civil works do not really fluctuate too much. And in fact, there's actually the economics of scale where you can get the same amount of civil works going extra far in terms of the number of households it can service, because you're going to have to put that new trunk in anyway. You're going to have to put that roundabout in anyway, whether that's 200 people, 200 households, for 800 households. So actually, there's like a step function in these kinds of calculations, and we can't comment on the exact dynamic of that step function because it is outside of our scope at this point.
So are you saying that the developer is offering more in terms of civil works than would be commonly expected from a developer?
So generally, I can say that in the projects that we've worked with municipalities and the developers before, civil works in terms of being done and gifted to the community is usually done when the site is on the margins of a community, like on the outer skirts. I can give you some examples from Alberta, for example, growing suburbs in the Edmonton and Calgary region. It's a fast growing part of Canada. When developers are turning sort of farmland or marginal land on the outskirts of the city, they usually pay the mega millions to put new water mains and all that kind of stuff in because it's on the outskirts of town. So it doesn't, that additional cost is purely there because of the developer's work, and it's out of the, I guess, the general service area that the city has already planned in terms of their OCP. However, in your case, in some respects, you guys are very lucky because the area is in your core and you want to make it a core. As far as we understand, the community and the staff and the council is interested in creating an urban core here, a commercial core. So it's actually a little bit aggressive for the government here to be asking for all of the civil works to be done and DCCs to be paid on a site that is actually an inner site rather than an outer site, which is more normal in terms of asking the developers to pay much more for that. And also there's greater margin for developers to pay for outer sites because those outer ring suburbs, for example, or exurban areas, they're comparatively, they're very cheap land because it's turning farmland into subdivisions. So
Interesting. Thank you. That was a very thorough explanation. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Gusselbrecht, you're next. And you're
I believe you're muted.
Oh, yeah, still muted.
Some would say that's good. For either Mr. Kahan or Mr. Yoshida, I'm not aware of where you're located, but do you have expertise? Have you dealt with other smaller communities, perhaps similar in size to Lantzville on Vancouver Island? And if so, what are your comments with respect to the amount of units that's being proposed? Is this lower density compared to other municipalities, medium, high? What are your thoughts?
So over the last 2 years, I've worked on 2 relatively large scale projects on Vancouver Island. Well, actually 3, if you include Victoria itself, which is, I guess, the whole urban area. There was a project in Souk we worked on, a housing study as well as an economic study there. There was a project in Victoria, the Roundhouse lands there, but that's a mega project, thousands of additional units. And there's also a project at Saanich, the public works yard in Saanich. It's not necessarily that close to you guys, but it's not a very large community, I guess, in the grand scale. And what they're doing there is also very similar, a site that is in the urban core of Saanich that is currently owned by the public sector. It's the public works yard being repositioned for higher density so that any profits realized from that can cover the cost of upgrading the facilities for the Saanich public works yard. And in that project, I believe, if I recall correctly, the feasibility analysis that we wrote for them was indicating around 200 to 300 units of additional density on a site that was, I believe, around 12 acres in size, which would be about 6 hectares, which is about 1/4 of the size that we're dealing with here. And that is a project that has, that's a commercial portion of the project where they actually are trying to realize revenues, with the other 8 acres of the 12 acres just being repositioned as a modern, high-tech, new public works yard. So we have worked with many of the communities on Vancouver Island. They all have different needs.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is other how do you view the unit density for this project, which is some 27 or 23 hectares? I'm aware of a project in Ladysmith. It's called the Rocky Creek Project, 4.7 hectares, and they're proposing some 282 units. Now, if you extrapolate that, the 4.7 hectares to the 23 that we're doing, that would be an equivalent of 1,410 units. So that would be just about twice the size of the proposal here. I realize the bigger cities like Nanaimo, which has the Green Thumb project, they're on 17 hectares. If you extrapolate that, they're talking about 2,500 homes. If you extrapolate that, that would be 3,400 units, 4 times the size of what's being proposed in Lantzville. So I guess I'm trying to rely on your expertise as to how you view the density, the units in this particular project for our community.
Yeah, we definitely view the density in terms of households per acre or households per hectare as very, very low, basically to the level. That's why I keep thinking about it as a suburban or exurban community in Alberta. It's so low that it's not really generally matching with BC communities, especially not BC communities, in a high growth regions of BC, for example, Nanaimo and its suburbs. So yes, for those exact things that you've highlighted, that's absolutely accurate. The density in terms of land area, accommodating number of units is very low. But I mean, on top of that, it's lower than what basically could even sustain the commercial facilities that the community looks like it's aiming to engender.
If I might, one further question. In Lantzville, we had a market, historically had a market up until several years ago. Our population has been static for 20 more years at around 3,600. I think we're 39 now. If you try to go to a coffee shop in anywhere in North Nanaimo, and I try to go to all of them, it's difficult to find a seat. Part of that is COVID, but part of that is the expanded expectation of people like myself, seniors and others, to get into a coffee shop. There aren't any. So for commercial establishments that would be looking for the downtown core, coffee shop, I can think of a lot of others, you don't need the much bigger density in order to attract smaller retail businesses like that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Generally, as we alluded to earlier, the lower order retail facilities do not require much, will require lower size populations in the trade areas to support them. That said, again, as you alluded to, 20 years of no growth. And my understanding, if Kyle can jump in here, is that many retail establishments in Lantzville have difficulties basically holding on to their space. Their sales volumes are too low to really make the rents. So you really need to be aiming for population expansion to really create a market for those kinds of facilities. But yeah, you wouldn't be expecting 5,000 additional people for one grocery store, for one coffee store. I can't give you the numbers for that directly right now. It's probably somewhere in one of our older reports.
Thank you.
And yeah, just a bit further to that point, that was also something that we, I think, realized in sort of the due diligence process, was that existing main road in Lantzville that has existing sort of retail commercial space. It did strike us as being relatively difficult to hold commercial tenants. So.
Yeah. Additional speakers. So Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. I just wanted to ask again about the viability of a grocery store. with this in mind, that in Upper Lantzville, on the other side of the highway, it's usually just as quick for many of us to go to Woodgrove as it is to go down to the village. And immediately in Woodgrove, there's a superstore, 141,000 square feet, Costco, 120,000 square feet, Save On Foods, 45,000 square feet. There's also a Walmart right there with a food department. And then there's two more grocery stores a short way up the highway at Longwood Station. So considering that, how viable do you really think it is for a 25,000 square foot grocery store to compete with all that? That's so convenient for at least Upper Lantzville.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. Because of the concentration of very mixed, high quality retail offerings in Woodgrove, it does become difficult for any retail facilities in Lantzville to actually capture appropriate market share. So usually the way to solve that sort of problem is to offer a very unique product. Maybe it's an organic or more organic oriented grocery store. Maybe it's locally owned. Maybe it's a grocery store that serves multiple uses in the community beyond just as a grocery store. So for example, it has other offerings. So a dine-in portion of that grocery store or other unique things like that. Or the other way to solve it is to have populations that are higher, and you try to change the dynamic from a driving isochrone to a walking isochrone, so that you bring that level of convenience to people who are living in the community. But yes, yeah, it is difficult. You can put yourself in the shoes of any small business person trying to operate there, and you'll see that it's the demographics and the economics don't play into each other very well, given the shrinking population, the stagnant population.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments from council? And I might have said one just follow-up question, comment, I suppose. Just with respect to our current commercial core, I'm just trying to reconcile, you made the comment about the existing, I guess, building, or sorry, buildings, keeping tenants or keeping businesses, by my accounts, and this isn't to be argumentative, but it appears that our village core is almost at 100% occupancy with businesses, and I don't see a high degree of turnover. So I'm just curious to where you got your data from for formulating that opinion.
Sorry, I had some microphone issues there. No, I think, well, a couple of things, just sort of in discussions with, the director of planning, that's sort of the qualitative sense, I think. And then number two, just taking a look at local businesses, and I think as Councillor Gesselbrecht sort of alluded to earlier, the grocery store, I think, was sort of the primary example we were thinking of, which we noted, just doing a quick, aerial and also, street view, just noting that, a lot of those businesses such as that, perhaps that's indicative of competitive pressures, number one. Number two, the fact that COVID probably has also had some increasingly sort of downward competitive pressures on these types of businesses, foot traffic, retail, commercial. And then number three, I think also looking at the perhaps the qualitative assessment of existing retail and commercial buildings and structures, just the assessment that, to my understanding, a lot of them were either built in the, dating back to the 1930s or the 1970s. And in that sense, it is relatively aging stock.
Additional questions, comments from council? All right, hearing none. Thank you for presenting this evening. And I'm sure if there's any further questions, council can reach out through our planner and have those questions directed to you. But again, on behalf of council, I'd just like to thank you for presenting this evening.
Great, appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Good evening.
So through to council, there are a couple staff recommendations in our agenda this evening. So is someone prepared to make the first recommendation? So Councillor Gesselbrecht, go ahead.
Thank you. That council accept the District of Lantzville Village South Special Area Plan Economic Impact Assessment dated November 2021 and the addendum dated February 2022 prepared by Urbanics Consultants Ltd.
And is there a seconder? So second by Councillor Proctor. Discussion. So through to you, Councillor Gesselbrecht is the mover.
Yes, simply council requested this report at the time we passed first and second reading for the Village South proposal. I thought it was a good idea at that time, and I suspect everyone else did because it was a unanimous vote. We received the initial impact statement. Councillor Savage was good enough to provide his comments, which caused the preparers of this report to go back, look at some of their assumptions and come back with an addendum that I think in their words were a more conservative view of the economic impact for Lantzville, which was a positive economic impact. So I think having said all those things, I certainly support accepting this report.
Okay, and through to Councillor Proctor as the seconder. And through to the rest of the council. Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just thought I'd give an overview of the revisions and sort of how they've changed the report. And the following revisions were made. District administration costs were added. District maintenance costs were added. Police costs with increases were added. Regional hospital and library taxes are no longer taken into account. GDP and employment impacts are no longer considered. In the initial report, tax revenues were overstated by 2.6 million due to a model area not reflecting phased tax collection, and the cash value of community amenity contributions was reduced from 28 million down to 5.2 million thereabouts. And on the summary of the Urbanics chart, page 64 of the agenda, the amount of parkland which counts as an amenity was reduced from 4.3 hectares to 3.2 hectares. And the revised report shows 232 houses with 500 apartments. That's 732 units. The initial report showed 215 houses, 300 townhouses, and 100 apartments for 615 units. And their summary of the cash flow part of their revisions are like this. We've got 6.2 million thereabouts, 20 years gross tax revenue, and offsetting this are $10.1 million in Urbanics costs. So we've got 4.1, 20 years administration costs, 2.2 million, 20 years district maintenance costs, 3.7 million, 20 years police costs with increases. This leaves a net tax loss of 3.9 million thereabouts 20-year next tax loss. So, and then as well, there's a minus 2.1 million DCC shortfall. So, and they've got 5.2 million thereabouts as the cash value of community amenity contributions. So that just gives a rough overview of where we're sitting with the economics here. Now there's 25.9 million, or we'll call it 26 million, is the value of civil works, which means the estimated cost to build such things as roads, services, and drainage as mandated by the district for development. Civil works just refers to works mostly done in the earth. These works are listed as an economic benefit, which offsets the other losses or costs. So is it really fair, though, to include the civil works, you know, the cost of development for roads and so on? Is it really fair to include it as an economic benefit to the community? For example, the roads within the development are really no benefit to me per se. And I haven't seen any other development in Lantzville where the roads and services within the development are credited as an economic benefit. And perhaps the drainage improvements on Jack's Road, things like that, might benefit some current residents, but I think this big number of 26 million is really more for mandatory things that are servicing just the residents of the new residents of this development, not the current residents. So in summary, the urbanics revision equates to almost a negative $3.8 million cash flow over the next 20 years, and non-cash amenities of $4 million thereabouts. Those are rounding those numbers off. And with the proviso, there's always ways to you know, adjust these figures so they're not written in stone. But generally,
Councillor Savage, you're at your 5 minutes.
thank you.
Through to additional speakers. And we can always start at round 2. Any additional speakers for round 1 on this item? Okay, and we'll go for round 2. Here's additional speakers. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yeah, I'll just finish off if I may, please. The way I did it, I broke this down into cash flow breakdown and then on paper breakdown, the non-cash things. So for example, the parks we're getting are absolutely wonderful. And, you know, I agree with the cash value that's been assigned to them, but it's not cash flow, it's on paper value. And the civil works are another example of on paper value. So I separated out the cash flow economics with the on paper economics. And I'm not quite sure, I forgot to ask where the playfield, the $1 million for the playfield, it's either in the amenities or in the civil works. I'm not quite sure which, but at any rate, to me, that's the number that the negative cash flow of the 3.8 million. However, I think that that's a little bit high for negative. I think there's ways you could adjust it where it wouldn't be that high, but basically that's what I get out of the report. Thank you.
Okay, additional speakers. So Councillor Gusselbrecht, go ahead.
Thank you. Barring Councillor Savage telling me he has a degree in economics, I'm going to go with the what's in the report, specifically at page 64, where the preparers of this report compared their original report with their addendum. And The number that I'm looking at is a net economic benefit to us here in Lantzville of some $25 million over 20 years, or spread out over 20 years, $1.2 million per year. I think that is a big economic benefit, and I'm glad we got this report, because it very clearly sets out all the various components that go into this, so that the folks in Lantzville can see exactly what the economic benefit is for the community. Thank you.
And excuse me, additional speakers? I'll just speak real briefly to it, and then if there's any additional speakers, and we'll go from there. And again, very brief. I think, we asked staff to go and get this report done. That's what they've done, and ultimately it's come back, and council had to read through it, and Councillor Savage gave feedback. I believe his own councillor gave feedback, and they've come back with an addendum report. So I believe the task has been completed. I think there's enough information in there for residents to review and decipher for themselves what is up and down when it comes to the report. In terms of, what I needed to hear out of or get out of the report, it's just ultimately, what is going to be the net benefit per year once it's built out, or, and so forth. So, that's what I was looking for. And that's all I need. So, so through the rest of the council, I don't know if there's any additional comments or questions before we vote. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move to calling the question. All those in favor?
Sorry, Mayor Swan, I just had one last comment, please.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
No problem. Thank you. Not to put too fine a point on it, but all I'm saying is that if you take all our current roads, on paper, we consider them an asset, and on paper, we can assign a value to them, but realistically, they don't affect our taxes that we have to pay, except in a negative way, and that is, it's for capital reserves. We pay money so we can afford to replace them one day, and for maintenance. So that's why I made the point with this. There's always two sides to the financial analysis. One is the cash flow. One is the assets, cash on paper. So as I say, again, the civil works figure doesn't offset our negative cash flow because it's an on paper value that's given, just like the rest of our roads. That's all. Thanks very much.
Okay. All right, any closing comments? All right, so I'm going to move to call in question. All those in favor and opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, so that takes us on to the next staff recommendation. And regarding public hearing, is someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor Gusbrecht, you already have your hand up, so I'm guessing you are. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to read out the recommendation, and I've added to it at the very end, so I'll read it. That the District of Lantzville Official Community Plan Bylaw number 150, 2019, amendment, Village South Special Area Plan, Bylaw number 283, 2021, be scheduled for a public hearing to be held at a special council meeting.
Okay, and then we have a second by Councillor Proctor. So through to council, I think the amendment to what was worded in the staff or in our agenda is that clear? Okay. All right, so through to Councillor Gusbrecht as the mover, you can speak to it first if you wish.
Yes, thank you. We're moving on with this, and the addition that I put in was that the public hearing be a special council meeting. I know there's a lot of interest in this proposal, And I think it would be to the benefit of everyone that it be a special council meeting. I'd like to, through the chair to staff, I haven't put a date in there, and I don't think it would have been proper for me to put a date, but could staff tell us what factors will affect when, if this motion is passed, when a special council meeting would be held?
Mayor, through to council, I'll take a crack at that. So the Local Government Act basically stipulates requirements with respect to hosting a public hearing. So there are requirements that we have to follow regardless of the size and scale of the development, with respect to giving notices, with respect to advertising, and so forth. And I think the other factor here is just making sure that we have the equipment available. As council is aware, we've been making upgrades to our council chamber to host electronic meetings, and in particular public hearings. That work is underway. And so, those are the main factors that would influence the timing around the public hearing. Certainly staff understands the significance of this particular rezoning application, and we'll endeavor to bring or set a public hearing date as soon as possible. But we want to make sure that everything is in order and complete, and there are no missteps with respect to following the Local Government Act.
Okay, any additional follow-up, Councillor Gusbrack? Okay, through to Councillor Proctor as the seconder.
Thank you. I found the presentation by Urbanics to be very interesting. And I know that there is a huge amount of interest in, and rightly so, in this project in our community, because it is right in the heart of our community. And I welcome a public hearing where we can hear from the public. I certainly hope that people will spend the time to listen to the Urbanics presentation and read the other things and really consider how the project is going to affect us down the road. And I look forward to hearing from the public and taking that into consideration when I move forward with this.
Okay, additional speakers. Okay, for myself, no objection here to moving forward with the public hearing, so I will be voting in support of it. Any additional speakers before I call the question? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move to call into question then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So that takes us on to bylaw number 284. So it says see item 9B in the staff report. And ultimately there's a recommendation there. So this is regarding the zoning bylaw. So Councillor Gusbrack, it looks like you're prepared to make this motion. So go ahead.
Thank you. Item 9C, that the District of Lantzville zoning bylaw number 180, 2020 amendment, Village South Special Area Plan Zone, bylaw number 284, 2021, be scheduled for a public hearing to be held at a special council meeting.
Okay, and do we have a seconder to the motion? So second by Councillor Proctor, and discussion on the motion. So through to Councillor Gusbrack is the mover.
I think my same comments are appropriate for this motion as well.
Okay, and through to Councillor Proctor is the seconder. Okay, and I'll open it up to the rest of the council. Okay, through to Councillor Savage.
Thank you. On the table now with what Director Limshu said in his report, there's a proposed amendment from the developer for Village South to cap the density at 200 units for Area C. And I would like to have a special meeting in the near future to formalize this amendment and to work together as a council to see if there are other improvements we could make to this proposal. We could agree upon before it goes to public hearing. I've always stated I want to see this development be successful. So why don't we see if there's not some common ground among us and with the public. So I'd like to make an amendment, please, to this motion. And at the end of the motion, it just reads, and further that council directs staff to schedule a special meeting of council to discuss the Village South application and consider the 200 unit limit of residential units in Area C and consider other proposed changes.
Through to Director Coates, do you need that reread?
Am I muted? Yes, please repeat it.
And further that council directs staff to schedule a special meeting of council to discuss the Village South application and consider the 200 unit limit of residential units in Area C and consider other proposed changes.
If I could just have it again from and consider.
And consider other proposed changes.
Sorry, I must have missed something there. I've got something about the limit. So the word consider before the limit.
Well, and consider the 200 unit limit of residential units in Area C. And consider other proposed changes.
So if I could just read this back to confirm if I've got it, if I've captured that, that the motion on the floor, the council amends the motion on the floor by adding, and further that council directs staff to schedule a special meeting of council to discuss the Village South application and consider the 200 unit limit of residential units in Area C and consider other proposed changes.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, and do we have a seconder to this amendment? Okay, I will second it then through to Councillor Savage as the mover to the amendment. Go ahead.
Yes, this was Councillor Proctor's idea. It was on the last agenda, or was it tonight's agenda? And then it appeared to have been removed, but I thought it was a good idea. And also with this new proposal from the developer group, it actually would be an amendment to the zoning to cap Area C at 200 units. So it would give us an opportunity to formalize and approve or consider this proposal they have given. And also if there's any other proposals councillors want to consider, we could do that at the same time. So basically that's it. But the main reason is to consider what the developer has, this brand new proposal from the developer is the key to it. Thank you.
Okay, as a seconder, I don't really have much to add at this time. So to me, it makes sense, but it just boils down to if council wants to consider any amendments pre-public hearing or proceed to the public hearing and then consider potential amendments to both the zoning and OCP bylaws. So it's really council's will on which direction to go and so on. But that's all I'll say at this point. Through to Councillor Proctor, you got your hand up. And then Councillor Gasselbach.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Limshu, it was my understanding from reading the Urbanics report that the developer has already agreed to cap area C at 200 units. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor to Council, the cap that's being proposed was brought forward by the developer, and it's specific to area C. I believe there was a bit of confusion with respect to what the potential build out could be on the project. As outlined in the staff report, area A, between area A and area B, it's very clear as to what the density is. So in area A, it's 25 units per hectare. Area B, it's 100 units per hectare. However, in area C, it's based on a floor area ratio. And so, the end count could vary between no residential units to, a number of residential units based on size, types, size of building, so forth, right? So to eliminate that confusion, I think the developer decided to bring forward or suggest, a cap of 200 units so that it's clear to everyone that, a build out, the maximum build out would be up to 732 units approximately.
And
that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be built out at 732. That particular area will probably be market driven.
so it could be lower than 732,
It could be lower than 732, correct?
but it can't be higher than 732.
That's correct. That's what's being put on the table right now.
So we don't need to discuss this and agree to it as a council because the developers already come forward with that. Is that now their proposal is now a cap of 732 units? Is that correct?
That's what they have put on the table, correct. In terms of the general land use, it's still the same. It's a mix of residential, single family, multifamily, with some commercial mixed in.
Thank you. So I think it would be my preference to make any adjustments to the proposal after we've heard from the public, because I think that we have a lot of information on the table. I think we've made every effort to make the information public. I hope people will watch portions of this meeting, for instance, the economic report, portions of other meetings. I know it's hard to bash through big, long agendas. I don't blame people for being wary of that. I found it a little eye-opening when I became a counselor. So I would prefer to make amendments after the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, through to Councillor Gasselbach.
Thank you. With that clarification by Director Limshu, that the proposal by the developer is a maximum of 732. I don't think there's anything further for council to discuss. Council can't tell the developer what to propose. I can't oppose my feeling or what I would like to see on the developer. And further, I think I stated this when we were doing first and second reading. Far be it from me to tell the public what I think I would like to do without hearing from the public would be incorrect and inappropriate. So we now know what the final number is. And you know, on that point, I think people have to realize that over the last at least 2 years, there's been a lot of to and fro between staff and the developer, and that's proper. The developer approaches the district, says, I have an idea. What do you think? Staff looks at regulations, looks at the OCP, looks at the zoning bylaw, and says, that might be good, that isn't so good. Here's what we propose. And that goes on. That's typical back and forth. So if there's been other numbers that have been out there in the public, you know, those have been proposals back and forth. Now going into the public hearing, we have a set amount. And I, for one, want to hear what the public has to say about this proposal before I decide what I want to do as a counselor. Thank you. So I can't support the amendment.
Okay, additional speakers? And first-time speakers? Okay, hearing none or seeing none, moving back to Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Like any good contract, it really should reflect the actions and intentions of what it governs. And all we've got now is a declared intention from the developer, but that's not reflected in the proposed zoning bylaw, which allows considerably more than 200 units in Area C. So through to staff, through chair to staff, please, is there a planned process to formalize this offer of the 200, or would it take a motion from council then during a regular council meeting if it's not a special council meeting, or what's basically the story here?
Through the mayor to council, Councillor Savage is quite correct. As it stands right now, the zoning bylaw doesn't stipulate a maximum in terms of build out units. However, there's a couple tools available to the district and to council. One is to amend the bylaw to actually stipulate a maximum build out number of units. I believe, as Councillor Savage is alluding to. I think the other mechanism is the fact that as part of this process, the developer is looking to enter into a phase development agreement with the district. And certainly that phase development agreement is a covenant between the district and the developer, and certain terms can be quite clearly stipulated in that agreement, not just with respect to the build out number, but also with respect to the amenity contributions that are being offered on the table. And I would expect that, that agreement will be part of this process at the end of the day to clearly articulate what is expected of the developer and what the district is going to get in its amenities package, and when those amenities are to be provided throughout the development.
Yeah, I think it's important, though, to have this in the zoning bylaw, because that's what's going to be approved or declined or whatever after the public hearing. So it really should be in there so people know what exactly they're getting with the zoning bylaw. But is that direction we could give you tonight, or would you prefer a formal motion on the next council meeting, or what would be your preference, Director Limshin?
It's at council's call and discretion as to how they want to approach this. As I mentioned, there are a couple avenues one could take with respect to locking in that maximum number. Staff will follow the direction given by council. Okay, and just before I leave the topic, would it be appropriate, Mayor Swain, to make the motion after this motion is dealt with, or as an addendum to this motion? What would be your preference, or an amendment rather to this motion?
Sorry, what would be your amendment? What are you suggesting?
To amend the zoning bylaw to reflect the developer's latest proposal. That would probably be the best way to do it, I guess.
you want to give me?
I'll deal with that after we deal with this. one.
Yeah, sorry, there's a motion on the
Yeah.
floor to amend the motion. And a bylaw amendment should be presented in writing. I believe the other option the director had put forward was through the phase development agreement.
Okay, thank you. And did you have anything else to add, Councillor Savage, or are you finished? You're muted, but I'm taking you're finished. Okay. I do have a follow-up, and this will probably be through to Director Lin Shu. With respect to if we were to amend the zoning bylaw to reflect that, the cap of 200 units in area C, or the total number of units, if that was done after the public hearing, would that then trigger another public hearing, or is that something that can be done following a public hearing without the risk of triggering another public hearing?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that question off the top of my head. I
I'm
think
not trying to give you a big loaded one, but
yeah, I think and certainly it's a question we can pose to our municipal solicitor to get confirmation on. My thought on it is that placing a restriction is if the motion were to, or if council were to enhance what's currently being put on the table in terms of allowing for additional density, then certainly it would trigger another public hearing. If we're looking at restricting the proposal even further, I'm not sure that it would necessarily trigger a public hearing. But again, I would have to seek counsel on that.
okay, fair enough. And for myself, just as a follow-up, I do have probably a number of amendments I will be proposing, but again, it's really the will of council if you want to do this ahead of the public hearing or following the public hearing. We have received a lot of public information to date, and I'm sure we'll get more information coming to us, and also in terms of the verbal submissions that will be made during the public hearing, in addition to more written submissions. So anyways, it's really the will of council what direction we go on with respect to this. Councillor Gusselberg, I think you're next, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we have an amendment on the floor. Are we going to get around to that?
That I believe we're discussing the amendment as we are now. That's scheduling a special meeting to discuss or propose amendments to the zoning bylaw. And if Director Coates wants to read back to council, that would be appreciated, please.
Yes, so the main motion that's on the floor, sorry, there's an amendment on the floor.
We have an amendment, so if
Yeah.
you can read back that
So,
amendment.
yeah,
please.
just the amendment.
Yes.
That council amends the motion on the floor by adding, and further that council directs staff to schedule a special council meeting of council to discuss the Village South application and consider the 200 unit limit of residential units in Area C and consider other proposed changes.
Okay. All right, so as long as everybody understands what we're voting on, has said my piece. I don't know if there's any additional comments or debate from council. Councilor Proctor, go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate that I feel that it would be in our best interest to have that conversation after the public hearing. I know we have gotten some public input, but I expect to get more public input before the public hearing and during the public hearing. So I wouldn't be able to appropriately consider any amendments that were put forward to me until the public hearing took place.
Any additional speakers' comments before I call the question or on the amendment? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I will call the question on amendment. All those in favor and opposed, Oh yeah, Councillor Gusselberg, Councillor Proctor, and Councillor Wilson opposed. The amendment fails, so we're back to the main motion. Any further debate? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, I have another amendment, please. And it's simply adding to the end of this motion. And further that zoning bylaw number 180-220 be amended by limiting the number of residential units in area C to 200 units.
Okay, I'll second that. Discussion, so through to Councillor Savage is the mover. Oh, actually, just 2 seconds, through to Director Coates.
Yes, I do need it
But did you
repeated.
catch it?
Sorry. No, I didn't.
Okay, no worries.
So I'll give you the first part again. And further that zoning bylaw number 180-220 be amended by limiting the number of residential units
Sorry, did you say bylaw number 220?
no, I'm just repeating what it says here. It's got 2020, sorry.
That's the year.
Yeah. So it's bylaw number 180-2020. So,
Sorry.
yes.
It's actually the bylaw that council is considering is bylaw number 284.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, I missed that. I'm just copying. I'm referring to this motion, this bylaw we're speaking to now. So bylaw number 284. Thank you.
And sorry, after 284, then
Be amended by limiting the number of residential units in area C to 200 units.
so the amendment reads that council amends the motion on the floor by adding and further that zoning bylaw number 180-2020 amendment Village South Special Area Plan Zone bylaw number 284-2021 be amended by limiting the number of residential units in area C to 200 units.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, we're just taking a quick check of the procedure bylaw because I think it speaks to the need for bylaw amendments to be in writing and whether it would be in order that it be part of another motion to schedule a public hearing.
Okay, so all right, I'll let you do that, and I've got a backup. I'll do it next meeting in that case, or I'll make a separate motion after this.
So
Yeah.
in the procedure bylaw, it talks about a proposed bylaw may be introduced at a council meeting only if a copy of it has been delivered to each member before the meeting, before the council meeting, or all members unanimously agree to waive this requirement. So I think it flows from there that the expectation is that it would be something in writing, but of course it's council's decision ultimately.
Yeah, okay. How about I'll do it to the next council meeting and I'll submit it in writing. Is that?
I just wanted to comment quickly. so through the Director of Codes, is it saying the introduction of a bylaw? We already have the bylaw in front of us. So this is just simply an amendment to a bylaw. So would that include amendments as well, or?
Yeah, yes. Well, I think it depends on the complexity. And certainly it's always up to council to ask to have a motion in writing. But the other part of this is the issue of your voting on something that is about scheduling a meeting. And then within the body of that, you're proposing an amendment. So I think it's just cleaner.
Yes,
If council's comfortable with it, it's your work.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Director Coates. I don't see them being totally connected. So, so it has been moved and seconded, through to the mover. I'm okay with withdrawing. I don't know if you are, or we can just do it by unanimous consent of council.
Yes,
would be on the floor.
I'd be happy to remove it. And if I could get, could I then make the motion separately after we deal with this one?
Okay, so through the council, there's two ways to do this. Technically, it has been moved and seconded. If I'm withdrawing my, seconding the motion, and Councillor Savage is withdrawing it, if that's sufficient, that's fine. We can just leave it at that, or we can do it by unanimous consent. So if there's any objections, state it now. Okay, so we'll just remove the amendment. So back to the main motion as it stands. Is there any further debate? Okay, hearing none, I will move to calling the question, and this is just on the public hearing. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. And through to Councillor Savage, simply because you're not putting it in writing, that would be technically out of order at this point. So what you would have to be doing is bringing it forward to their next council meeting.
Very good, thank you.
All right, so that takes us on to item 10A under unfinished business. We have the Dickinson Road speed limit survey. Information is on our agenda for information. Not aware of any motions. It's just there for information. Okay, Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Thank you. Yes, I've looked at the list that was provided at pages 176 and 177 of our agenda. Of the persons who were noted on this, there was yes, limit it, 22, no, don't limit it to 30 kilometers an hour, 26 people. However, I'm looking at this list. I see some people put half and half. I don't know what that means. I've struck all the people who don't even live on Dickinson Road or on the feeder roads going in, like Seacrest Terrace, or even up there at Nestor Way, Owen Road, Colette. I've left those in. So if you take out all the people who are, one guy's in Alberta, take out all of those, you still come to a 14 in favor of limiting the 30 to 30, and 13 saying, no, we don't want to limit it. What I found helpful was some of the comments that people sent in, and particularly a comment from one of the replies that said, let's wait till we replace Dickinson Road. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's on the agenda for this year. Because at that time, we can look at walkways or a walkway along Dickinson Road as it's being replaced. That, in my mind, would be the biggest benefit and safety benefit for Dickinson Road, just as it would be for Ald's Road or for Ware Road going down into the village. It's a real safety issue. And aside from that, we have two development proposals off of Dickinson Road. One of them calls for a concrete divider in Dickinson Road. Another is calling for a flashing speed sign on there. So I think with the fact that residents are divided, it is a major artery into the downtown. We've already limited Ware Road or Lantzville Road in the downtown to 30, extending all the way down to Peterson Road. Dickinson hasn't been, I don't know if you really improve people speeding by lowering it as opposed to some form of enforcement or crosswalk, flashing signs. So my take is that when we come to replacing this road this year, that we look very carefully at how we want it done and whether we have the money in the budget to do it. But here's our chance to fix up Dickinson to make it biker and walker friendly. Thank you.
And I was just going to comment on that as well, just briefly. And from my understanding, the road replacement will include a sidewalk on one side of the road. So we don't have to worry about looking at that in the future. And I'm sure Public Works will be looking at anything they can do to try and make it so people start slowing down a little bit. As it's well known, I live just off of Dickinson. I do refer to it as Speedway by the seaside all the time because it is just that. And people go up that road just as fast as they come down it, and it's purely shameful, unfortunately. People traveling at the speeds they do up and down that road. And, I don't get it, but unfortunately, we haven't had, I don't believe we've had any serious accidents along that stretch. So I am hopeful that, at some point in the future, some of those traffic calming features from some of the small developments in that area will help. And that's all you can hope for. And I think that in combination with the road itself or the new sidewalk going in, getting pedestrians off the shoulders and so forth will also help. So, but I do really appreciate the residents that took the time to participate in giving us that feedback. And it was interesting to see how split it really was and so forth. And I think it comes down to one thing. I think a lot of people just wish for more common sense. And that's basically it. And pretend for a second that, when you are going through that neighborhood, treat it like your own and slow down like your kids are playing on the side of the road or and so forth. So it's just about having, respect for neighborhoods as you're traveling through them. Anyways, those are my 2 cents, maybe a little bit more than that. Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think the summary of the survey needs a little revamping. Some people where there was 2 in a household were counted as 2. Other times they were just counted as 1, the 2 people. So when you count all the people and all the correspondence, it came to 28. Yes, they would like to see a reduction in the speed to 30. 25 said no, and then there was 2 who wanted 40K limit, 2 who had another idea of how to split up the speed zones, and then 1 had another idea how to split up the speed zones. And then when I broke it down by areas, there was on Dickinson Road, there was 10 yes, 4 no. On the little side roads that are where they have to use Dickinson Road, it was 7 yes, 0 no. And as you move out, it was 1 yes. And then for the rest of the comments living, a couple of blocks or further from Dickinson, it was 10 yes, 21 no. But I agree with Councillor Gesselbrack, it was the comments. And when you put out when you invite people to give feedback, it's really important to listen and consider what they said. And as I say, you can never think of everything. And the one resident that brought up the the transit routes, it was clever to bring up that you're going to affect the routes if they have to slow down for that long distance on Dickinson Road. Another one brought up that the law-abiding people will drive 30, which would be probably a hardship for the length of that long road, while the ones who don't pay attention to speed limits will continue to, go the speed they want. So it's really not rewarding the people who pay attention to the speeding signs. The idea was, this was brought up to me by a resident just off Dickinson. And so I brought it forward to the safety committee, but first I checked out to see if there would be support of it. There appeared to be some support on Dickinson, so that's how it evolved. That's what started it. And but the idea of putting up a 30 sign and hoping people go 50, that's got some downsides to it. I think people have brought up, and there's certainly not an overwhelming majority that responded that are for it. So, so those are my, and then a businessman too, which was a good input, is that they felt it might affect people wouldn't bother coming into the village that usually come that route if it's reduced down to 30. But I believe the consensus with everyone is they recognize the danger. And I am aware of some serious accidents on that road over the years, which just, we hadn't heard about them, that's all. I know one involving teenagers, for example, some years ago in the evening, and there was a serious injury in that one. So, but anyway, I would suggest we deal with this at the next standing committee. And I really appreciate the comments that we saw. And I think the whole idea is to make sure that we get this road safer. And next year will be a good opportunity with the road, the new road, to do so with lots of traffic calming and so on. But I think that's the key result of the survey. So, but I look forward to dealing with it at the next standing committee. Thank you.
All right, so we have another motion. Sorry, any other additional speakers' comments on that? Okay, moving on, we have item 10B, so Lantzville Village Self-Development Residential Units. There's a motion on the floor that staff publicized within 7 days the approximate maximum total number of residential dwelling units that could be possible to achieve within the proposed zoning for current village self application. So it's on the floor. Discussion on this. I believe that was your motion, Councillor Savage. So go ahead if you wish.
Yes, thank you. I think this has been accomplished. I think we've got the number now. So I think the motion's no longer necessary. So thank you.
All right.
For clarity, is there unanimous consent to withdraw it? Is that?
Well,
While I'm
I
recording?
was just thinking, there's a couple of different ways of skinning this cat, but I think we can just go with unanimous consent to withdraw the motion from the floor. So, so I'll just ask through the council by unanimous consent, is there any objections to withdrawing this item from the floor? Okay, hearing or seeing no objections, so we'll consider that it is being removed. So that takes us on to new business. So actually we have no new business except for mayor and council verbal updates. So we'll start with Councillor Kesselbrack, if you wish.
Thank you, Mayor. At yesterday's meeting of the RDN, we had a very good presentation by a deputy director of BC Assessment. And I know that that topic's on everybody's mind with the increase, but there's a couple of facts. There was a very good slide presentation. I've asked staff to put that onto our village website very good explanation of how the assessments work. If you wanted to appeal your assessment, you had to contact them by January 31st. And there's an actual appeal process through BC Assessment, which ends on April 31st. And then after that, if you still don't like it, you can appeal to the BC Supreme Court on an issue of law. What I wasn't clear on is that the assessment that you received on January 1st or thereabouts, that value was actually calculated as of July 31st of last year. So there's 6 months lag in the actual assessed values because a chart was prepared which shows the increase in the values in the last 6 months, and they are astronomical as well. So that will most likely show up, well, it will show up in next year's assessments. But it's July 31st when they are capped. An interesting point is the definition of non-market change. Market change is the change that takes place when the value of houses goes up. That's called market change. Non-market change includes such things as new construction, because if you add new houses into an area, a district, that's going to usually raise the value of all the houses in that area. Demolitions, that would tend to decrease the value in that area. Subdivisions going in are like new construction that tends to increase the value of the homes. Zoning changes, where a zone is changed, there might be an upzoning that will affect the assessment. Boundary extensions or property class changes. So I know that we discuss this sometimes when we're doing our budget. What are the non-market changes that take place in our assessments? To finish up, and I'm sure we've read this or seen this in the news, that in Lantzville, the residential single family increase for this year was 35%. The commercial assessed value increase was 22%. On Vancouver Island, there was a 75% increase in the single family sales, single family house sales, from 8,000 in 2020 to 14,000 in 2021, an almost 100% increase in the number of sales. And this was the first year in the assessor's opinion, as far as he can remember, that for sales north of the Malahat, forget Victoria, north of the Malahat, there were 1,000 single family homes that sold for over $1 million, which he found crazy, but those are the numbers. Thank you.
Just a question through you, Councillor Gesselbrecht, with respect to the regional district Nanaimo, or all the members, including electoral districts or areas. Did Lantzville take the lead this year in terms of the average assessed home value?
No.
Or is Nanaimo still?
No, a couple of the electoral areas, electoral area E, Nanoose, electoral area F, Arrington, and G, which is that sort of a rump electoral area between Parksville and Qualicum, they were closer to 40%.
No, I don't mean, I just mean total dollar value, like house value, not the percent changes. So in terms of like Lantzville, the average house now is $1 million. Is Nanoose ahead of us or behind us? Because I think
I believe Nanoose was ahead. I didn't copy that one.
Yeah,
sorry.
I know the percent changes were.
I know it's competition, and there's been a lot of development out in Nanoose as well. So there's a lot of million-dollar homes out there, a lot of multi-million-dollar homes out there. Thank you.
Through to Council Proctor.
I don't have anything this week. Thank you.
And Councillor Wilson.
Nothing. Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you. I'd like to give a congratulations to Lantzville resident Kyle Knox, who is now occupying Slag Lumber with his construction company. It's great to see Slag has got some occupants, and we'll get busy there again. And village businesses, as far as I can see, are now fully occupied. In fact, they're usually above 90% occupied from what I've seen over the years. So in its own way, we do have a functioning, vibrant village which offers a variety of services, and it's surprising just what a variety and the number of services we have. Just to name some of them, we've got the Legion Boys and Girls Club, music lessons, music recording studios, security business, bus shelter with a library that's always busy, a post office, 2 hairdressers, Greek restaurant, interior design company, a pub, liquor store, pet supplies, dog training, construction company with office space, kitchen design company, doctor's office, gourmet restaurant, dentist, 2 accounting firms, wellness center, offering a variety of health services. And with the wellness center, they just announced 2 more specialists, which is just fabulous. They've got a real array of specialists there. We're very lucky to have them right on our doorstep, all these medical specialists. And there's a pharmacy, medical center with doctors, and the jeweler, of course, great jeweler, Keller's Jewelers. So I'd just like to mention those. It's good now and again to recognize just how many services we have in our local village. So again, congratulations to Kyle Knox, our newest member there, and maybe one of these meetings we can list all these services in the industrial park as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it is worth noting for sure. All the people that have also done improvements to their businesses in the village. So I was gonna, it's not a correction, but we have doctors' offices, or we, anyways. So which is pretty fantastic. So for myself, I really don't have anything to update this week or for the last 2 weeks, but just in a general note, the community groups doing cleanups. It's fantastic to see people out cleaning up and so on in different areas and so forth. And it'd be neat to see more people out and about just cleaning up around their roads and so on. So hopefully in the next coming weeks, we'll see more people out just randomly picking up garbage, because it's a good thing to do and keeps our roads clean. So other than that, that's all I have. With respect to introduction of late items, are there any late items to introduce? Okay, any notices of motion? And in terms of public clarification, do we have anybody on the lines?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. And we have made it to our agenda and pretty good time this evening. So with that being said, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.